Joining us now is Board of Aldermen President Megan Green. Good to have you with us on this Monday. We're joining you right before a scheduled session of the Board of Aldermen is set to resume tomorrow.
Yes.
And this is after a dramatic, I don't know how you would describe it, series of events that unfolded on Friday. Should we just start there?
Sure.
What happened on Friday?
So basically, Alderwoman Saunier had gotten up with Board Bill 153 floor sub, and we were starting into debate on that bill, which has all of the resident priorities in it.
And for our viewers following along, that's the RAM spending plan.
That is the RAM spending bill.
Nearly $300 million.
Almost $300 million funds, infrastructure, downtown, north side, childcare.
And this is the bill you back.
Yes, this is the bill that I back. And so discussion was just starting on that when there were a number of procedural kind of motions that were afoot that were first causing a lot of like chaos and kind of disorganization. But then it became clear that a bill was, there was a motion afoot basically to strip that bill of all of the resident priorities that were in it except for water. And then there had also been another motion that brought up Board Bill 131, which, if you recall, was the original downtown bill.
It didn't have any early childhood funding in it.
Correct.
And a number of other things.
Yes. And so, you know, I'm trying to weigh, like, you know, what is the play here? What is the game here? Especially given that 131, if it was passed in the form that it currently is, our city departments would not be able to implement it. And so,
because you didn't feel there was enough specific language in it directing where the funds would go.
Correct. And our departments had said that kind of on the record, and so in my mind, we needed to take a step back. We needed to have some further conversations.
Yeah.
It didn't want us to perfect a bill that then we couldn't end up implementing.
Do I hear you right that you were learning on the fly? You were trying to read and assess the situation. You had legislative whack-a-mole unfolding before you?
Exactly. And so my job as president has to be to try to maintain order, try to maintain decorum, and when you have 5 motions that are being shouted to you at the same time, when you have a bill sponsor that is kind of being blindsided, we had to, I thought the best thing for that moment in time was to kind of take a recess, let's get some, diffuse some tensions, get folks around the table, have some conversations, figure out what the game plan is, and come back when cooler heads prevail.
And we're looking forward to that debate unfolding. I want to get into some of the specifics of that. But before I do, just on a parliamentary procedural basis, is the floor of the Board of Aldermen chamber suited for debates like that, where you have these amendments attached or you have new bills introduced? Can you handle that kind of big, meaty debate right there?
I mean, it's challenging. I'll be honest, especially if there are new amendments that are brought forth that maybe city departments haven't had a chance to look at, legal teams haven't had a chance to look at. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that legislation that crosses the finish line is done correctly and not just rushed.
You don't bear the title speaker, but you perform the function essentially of a speaker in a legislative chamber. And in Illinois, the former House Speaker, Mike Madigan, was known for springing big, heavy spending bills on members, many of whom didn't know all the details and they would have to be forced to vote. And he was using that leverage on them. In this case, my observation was that it seemed to be some of your colleagues were doing that to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a correct kind of assumption, but what I want to take it back to is, 14 months ago, we started the RAM settlement engagement process, and we did it structured as the committee of the whole because I wanted to make sure that every single member of the Board of Aldermen was involved in that process, was able to hear from the community, was able to bring forth, what their concerns were, priorities were, and we've done numerous check-ins with alder people across this process. And so, getting to the floor and, all of a sudden having a completely different bill be the one that's being brought up for discussion, I think just warranted everybody kind of taking a step back, having some conversations.
Yeah, it was assigned to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it was assigned to me that maybe you didn't have the broad consensus that maybe you thought you did.
Correct. I think going into the meeting, we thought that there was consensus around 153. And Alderwoman Saunier thought that there was consensus around 153. And so, if there isn't, especially when we are dealing with a bill that is this important, with this many aspects to it, we got to get it right.
Jacob Kern, the managing editor of the St. Louis Business Journal, remarked that he hadn't seen events quite this dramatic on the floor of the in decades, in like 20 years. When you swore the oath of office and took control of that gavel, you pledged to value collaboration over conflict. Your decision was kind of abrupt, and it left a lot of people wondering, wait a minute, she just left the floor. Was your decision consistent with that spirit of collaboration Friday?
I think so. It was recognizing that we needed to get people back around the table to talk to each other. And, the expectation that I've tried to lay out on the board is, if you're going to do an amendment, at least give the bill sponsor a heads up, that it's coming. At least give our office a heads up.
Those aren't in your rules. They're not required to do that.
They're not required, but it's a measure of collegiality to just make sure that you're not trying to do like a gotcha moment with your colleagues, and especially a colleague who has put an enormous amount of work into this legislation over the last 14 months. I wanted to make sure that Alderwoman Saunier really had the opportunity to get back to conversation with her colleagues, understand what was happening.
I sense that you wanted to protect her from the broadside, but she told us after that she wanted to hear some discussion and debate about these bills on the floor. She felt like you cut it short.
I mean, that could be accurate. I haven't had that conversation with her, but I'll just say, being up there in the moment, I wanted to make sure that we had discussion on all the priorities that the public has asked us to weigh in on, not just one. And I thought that given the new movement of 131, there needed to be some more getting folks around the table.
And just for our viewers who are still watching this conversation, any reference to 131 just means more social supports for early childhood for tuition. Is that correct?
It's opposite.
Did I invert them? See,
You
I got it wrong.
inverted them. So 153.
131 is downtown heavy. And there's a third bill which is starting to emerge, which is just water and save the rest.
Correct.
We'll get into that in a minute.
Correct.
I want to circle back to this question about collaboration versus conflict. Let's get to the elephant in the room. After that night, you posted on social media that one of your colleagues, in your words, was, quote, visibly intoxicated. Alderman Joe Vollmer strongly denies that. Was that not conflict heavy?
I want to, sincerely apologize to Alderman Vollmer. I should have taken up any concerns that I had with him directly instead of going to social media. And, I recognize that I did not live by the expectations that I try to set for other members of the board. My comments were not professional, and I take ownership of that. I recognize that I'm not perfect as a person, and I think leadership is about recognizing when we cause harm, taking accountability for it, and then working to repair harm in whatever way we can to move forward.
I appreciate the accountability and just saying that. This was some time after the meeting had concluded when you posted this. And in a separate post, you said that you saw open containers of alcohol in a side room, but you only came to that conclusion long after the meeting had ended yourself. So can you clarify what exactly you saw and when?
I did, upon leaving the chambers, see the open containers of alcohol, and I just want to make it clear.
Wine, liquor?
Wine, liquor. And want to make it clear that that is not typical behavior at the Board of Aldermen, that it is not something that I find acceptable.
And this is in a side room, not on the chamber floor.
Correct, just off.
Within reach, and it was your view that this was something that was being consumed. It wasn't on a shelf.
Correct. It was laid out for consumption, and from my point of view,
Why do you think anyone was consuming it during the meeting and not just after?
I can't answer that. What I can answer is that we are looking.
I wish you could. So are you saying that you can't say with any certainty that someone maybe opened it after the meeting?
What I'm saying is, at this point in time, it's a personnel matter, and we are taking the appropriate steps at the board to make sure that alcohol is not opened, is not consumed during, board meetings or when official business is being conducted.
Do you think members of the public would be surprised to learn that right now the rules on the House floor or on the board floor don't prohibit this already?
I think they may be, and it's something that we're looking at, addressing in the upcoming session. I think. We've unfortunately heard of other legislative bodies having, rooms that have been turned over into bars. We heard that at the state capitol. That is not the type of precedent that we want to set at the Board of Aldermen. And I think that all of my colleagues agree with that. So, going forward, I think we're all committed to making those changes.
One last question on this, and then I want to move on the alcohol portion. Because if it was true that members of the Board of Aldermen in St. Louis were on the precipice of making one of the most transformational spending decisions in the city's history, and they were loaded, while doing intoxicated, that would be quite the news item. That would be pretty big news. I think the public would deserve to know that. But none of your colleagues on the board were able to corroborate your initial accusation, and you're now walking it back. Where does that leave the public? Should we still have concern that people were consuming alcohol, or do you feel that you were mistaken in your assessment?
I think, what I do know is that there was alcohol present, and that any presence of alcohol at our meetings is not acceptable. And I think everybody agrees to that. At the current time, it is a personnel matter that we have to address internally. And but I think going forward, our rules will be clear that is not something that is welcomed at the Board of Aldermen.
I hear you. I want to understand where your position is going forward, because when you went into recess, and I apologize, I think I mistakenly called it an adjournment in the haste of running back down here to our studio after everything happened pretty quickly. We called it an adjournment, and that was not correct. So it was a recess for anybody who cares about the parliamentary procedure there. And your colleague, Alderwoman Ann Schweitzer, who brought up this big water bill, she was the one who said, when we get back in, I'm next in line to speak, correct?
Correct. She is next in line to speak.
And so she's going to make a motion. I think she intends to carry forward with her plan to push this water bill only through and let the rest of the money sit and wait and accrue interest.
What I understand is this weekend accomplished exactly what I was hoping it would accomplish. When I put us into recess, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderwoman Saunier have had the opportunity to sit down and talk, and I think reach some agreement. And so I expect a very different meeting tomorrow. When folks kind of take a deep breath, they're willing to sit down, work collaboratively with each other, which is my understanding of what has taken place this weekend. I think then we get to a much healthier place in our debate.
So you don't expect her to press forward with that water plan?
I expect that there is agreement between Alderwoman Schweitzer and Alderwoman Saunier on how to both move forward collectively.
Can you add any specifics, or is that still a negotiation that's
I'm going to leave it at that for now.
Okay.
But I know that both of them have, I think, spent a good amount of time trying to get on the same page as each other, understand each other's concerns. That's exactly what we want to see from folks in the legislative process, and I think that they're both committed to coming in with a unified front tomorrow.
I want to see if we can drill down a little bit better to what your colleagues and what the public can expect from you in this role, because you no longer just represent one ward, as you had for many years. You represent now the whole city, and
exactly.
In that position, you're a steward basically of the whole chamber. Is it your position that you will only let bills advance that you agree with?
That is not. That is absolutely not the way that I approach the job. And there have been bills that have passed that I have not voted for that have still passed the Board of Aldermen. So I want to make clear about that. I do think, as a citywide elected official, I am responsible to the needs and priorities of all city residents. And when we went through the massive public engagement process that we did for the RAMS funds, we heard from residents citywide, and they had priorities that, yes, we're water, but we're also infrastructure and north side development and downtown development and housing supports and childcare. And so my role is to make sure that all of the diverse perspectives of our community is represented in legislation once it gets across the finish line, especially something as important as this. Residents asked us to do multiple things, and we need to figure out the way forward to get all of those priorities that residents laid out for us across the finish line.
Yeah, a former high-ranking executive at SLDC said this city has billion-dollar problems and only hundreds of millions of dollars to fix it.
That is correct.
I was a little bit confused, if I can confess, coming out of the press conference in your office, because you said that it was corporate interests that were hijacking the process. How is water infrastructure a corporate interest? I think
we're not talking about water infrastructure when we're talking about corporate interests. We're talking about the business community and Board Bill 131.
But that wasn't the bill that was cropping up when you shut debate down.
That was the bill that had been taken out of committee in order to bring it forth. And so from my vantage point, what it looked like was occurring was 153 was going to be taken down just to water, so that 131, which was the downtown specific bill, would be the only bill that was moved forward. And that bill was not properly vetted in committee, had a lot of issues that would make it impossible for it to implement. And so what I was concerned about is that bill being perfected that day and then not being able to actually implement those funds because that bill was not ready to move forward at that time.
I wasn't clear that, and I don't mean to belabor the point here, but I wasn't clear that the downtown bill, just because it was ready or primed for a debate and a potential vote, that it would, couldn't you have added amendments to it right there on the floor?
We could, yes.
But you weren't weren't prepared for that.
Well, the challenges with that bill, I think, are beyond some simple amendments. They're structural issues, and I think when we're talking about funding of this magnitude that we're expecting our city departments to implement, we have to make sure our city departments can actually do it. And that was a lot of the conversation in committee around that bill, was the concern that city departments hadn't been engaged in this. And so if we're trying to forward something that we know they can't do, that's just going to tie up Rams money and not actually get it out to the community like we want.
People watching might wonder what I'm trying to phrase my questions carefully, because some of the parliamentary stuff, how you add an amendment, it can get kind of confusing.
It can.
And I appreciate the work that the clerk and many other staffers over there do in keeping some of that going while we try to translate it. Okay, I want to dig down to one important issue here before we let you go, because at the start, I wonder if maybe you've moved the goalpost a little bit in the negotiation. At the start, you said, okay, big business, you want a big piece of this money for downtown, put up your end. And Greater St. Louis said, okay, you put in $100 million, we'll put in $200 million. You said no deal. Then there was a deal for $74 million down in downtown, and they said, okay, well, we're not going to put a full 200, but we'll match it 1-to-1. We'll put in $74 million. Again, you said no deal. Let's pare that down even more and put more money this way. Are you? I don't know what you want. I don't know if people know what you want. How do they win your approval?
I think the key to me is making sure that we can hold people accountable to the promises that they make. And still to this day, I am not confident that the funding that Greater St. Louis has promised actually exists. And in the press release,
didn't it say that to get the money you had to put up the public funds first?
We do, and some of the matching funds that they listed in their letter were projects like the green line, the brick line, which will move forward regardless of Rams money. And so the question for me is, should that really be counted as a match if that
money they had already committed.
Is already committed and already moving
if that
forward?
Was an old commitment, you want new commitments.
Correct.
Okay, I understand you there.
And so that is one part of it. The second part of it is, I think that, as I said at the press conference, kind of that day when Alderwoman Saunier and Alderwoman Boyd come together, I definitely believe in alder people coming together, making consensus, collaborating with each other. I also believe in the legislative process, and made it clear that while there was a deal between these two, alder people, that there would still have to be a committee process that played out. This would still have to go through the Board of Aldermen.
That's where the 10 amendments came on.
And beyond myself, like at the time of the press conference, no bill had been drafted as of yet.
Well, that was quite frustrating to those of us in the press trying to translate a press release that, that was a sign to me that it wasn't quite done.
There yet.
Yeah.
And so, wanting to make sure that, the things that I believed were happening and occurring were things that were represented in the bill when it left committee. For example, Southeast City had been left out of the bill. That was not intentional, but it was something that had happened along the way. And so, that's what our legislative process is for finding those issues, for making sure that all voices are heard in a process. And because just like, Greater St. Louis was really happy with the bill with $74 million, there were other constituency groups that saw their funding decrease through that proposal, and conversations had not been had. And so I think, part of this process is it's going to change over time, but you have to engage your stakeholders throughout the process, all of your stakeholders throughout the process, in order to actually move something forward.
Even the special interest. I'm going to move past that remark real quick. So the last question I have for you is just on the policy, because when Greater St. Louis put out their big plan back at the very beginning of all this, you and I think the mayor endorsed another plan. And at the time, you said, we're only going to let early childhood education providers draw down on these funds once interest has accrued. So if we have $30 million in a pot, you can only spend the extra money when it accrues interest. Did
Correct.
I understand that correctly?
Yes, so it would.
But you've thrown that plan away, and you said, have you not? That we're just going to take the big block grant essentially, and then let them draw down on the existing funds?
Oh,
not-
no.
So that's still,
that
that
is-
metric still stands,
That
rubric of-
correct. That metric is still in the bill. It's still set up as an endowment. So the principal of it could not be tapped, only the interest that's generated on an annual basis. And then it leaves the door open to private, philanthropic dollars to help grow that endowment over time to expand the program.
So the $34 million would not be the funding pool, it would be the money that grows interest, and the interest off that $34 million
Correct.
would fund childcare for city workers first, and then maybe some others down
And
the
then as we grow that endowment, it would expand over time.
There are a lot of things in here: childcare, college tuition, other benefits for housing like down payments and things. And as I've read the bill, I don't see anything in here that would prohibit members of the Board of Aldermen from availing themselves to these benefits. Are these the kinds of benefits that Board of Aldermen members, technically city workers, should be entitled to?
I mean, the biggest problem we have right now in being able to provide city services is a workforce shortage. And so we have to be
Well,
providing.
there's no shortage of aldermen.
There's no shortage of aldermen. There are a shortage of workers.
Right.
And so forwarding forwarding benefits that just apply to city workers, I think is a mechanism that we have when we don't have authority as a Board of Aldermen to unilaterally raise wages. That is the job of the Civil Service Commission. We cannot act without the Civil Service Commission, and I think there's often some confusion about that. So we had to look at what are ways that we can support city workers beyond just increasing salaries. And so one of the things we could do is help subsidize childcare, or help pay for their kids' college education, or pay for professional development and training, so that they can, fill additional roles within city government.
Yeah, just so I'm clear, are you saying that as drafted right now that aldermen could apply for and receive these benefits?
I would have to check on that. I mean, older people are technically city workers.
Would you support language that would make it clear that they could not apply?
Oh, definitely.
Because?
If that's what we need to do to get it over the finish line, I'm happy to do that. Typically, the way it works in city government is all benefits are accessible to all city workers, but if for public perception or whatever, we need to carve out the Board of Aldermen or any elected official, I think that's a reasonable compromise.
Board of Aldermen President Megan Green, a lot of busy work ahead tomorrow and Tuesday. We'll be tuning in and watching. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
We'll see you then.